Faith.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Faith, your experience with determining whether stories are abide by journalistic standards is based more in academic sense, correct?
Yes, that is true, yes.
So you've never worked as a journalist?
No, I've never worked as a journalist.
You've never worked as an anchor for any news company? Okay. Now, you reviewed the 6 affidavits from the 6 witnesses before this trial, correct?
Yes.
You never met with any of those witnesses in person, however?
No, I did not. I chose, in the interest of fairness, to just review the affidavit since I could not interview all of them.
So you never picked up a phone call to speak with any of these witnesses?
No.
So don't you think that with things such as tone of voice is important to determine if a person's telling the truth?
In some cases, yes, it's important, but in this case, I determined that I did have the necessary documents to come to my conclusions and review the case.
So you never you never saw these witnesses' body language when giving when they're giving their affidavits, correct?
I never spoke with any witnesses.
Now, you've seen reports on BNN before, correct?
Yes.
And according to your standards, BNN tramples on such standards.
Yes, they do. That is an opinion I've had, but while reviewing this case, I reviewed the case in a vacuum. So any prior opinions of BNN were not did not influence my review of this case.
So, but according to you, BNN represents the worst in journalism. Is that correct?
I have said those things again, but as I said before, I reviewed this case in a vacuum, so my opinions of BNN have not interfered with my review of this case. But I did say those things, yes.
And you consider your testimony today to be of an expert? You have an expert opinion on such matters?
Absolutely, yes.
Now, the first, one of the first standards that you abide by is thoroughness, correct?
Yes.
You believe thoroughness to be vital to journalistic ethics?
I do.
Yet, isn't it also true that BNN only took 15 minutes in their investigation?
BNN did take 15 minutes in their investigation, but again, this was a breaking news story.
Thank you. But you also,
Objection, Your Honor. I'd ask that my witness be able to answer the questions that was asked of him.
Did you finish your answer?
No, I did not.
You have to let him finish the answer.
Again, this is a breaking news story, so there is a quest to sort of get the information as quickly as possible.
but to answer my question, Mr. Faith, yes or no, BNN only took 15 minutes for their investigation?
Yes.
You also believe that a reporter should never ignore a source, correct?
Yes, I do agree with this in some cases.
Now, Jan Patel was a source that night, correct?
Yes.
And not once did Reagan Thomas ever ask Jan Patel a question that night.
Thomas did, can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Reagan Thomas never asked a question of Mr. Patel that night, did he?
Thomas deemed Patel as an unreliable source, which is why he discounted what Patel was going to say.
But to answer my question, Reagan Thomas still, despite what he thought, did not ask Mr. Patel any questions.
No.
And in your expert opinion today, a journalist should seek out all subjects for a report, correct?
Yes.
Now, that night, during the investigation, Mr. Thomas never spoke with Drew Walton. Is that correct?
Again, as I stated before, this was one of the major shortcomings on the part of Drew Walton. Of Reagan Thomas, but not necessarily BNN.
Mr. Walton never at once attended the press conference that night.
You mean Mr. Thomas?
Yes, sorry. Mr. Thomas, yes.
Yes, as I stated before, this was a shortcoming on the part of Mr. Thomas.
You also believe that accuracy is vital for journalistic ethics, correct?
Yes.
And that journalists should never take information out of context, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, could I just borrow the point really quick from opposing counsel? Now, Mr. Faith, can you read this silently, or would you need to stand to read this?
I can read it.
Okay. It says right here, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Is that what it says?
Yes.
Now, isn't it true that Reagan Thomas was never there for that incident?
That is true, but if you look before, it says he's spoken with several eyewitnesses again, so that shows that he is relying on information from eyewitnesses to come to his conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Kiffin. But still, it says here, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Isn't that showing that Mr. Faith saw the incident with his own eyes?
I guess you could interpret it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Faith. Now, it also says, at this point right here, can you read that for me, Mr. Faith?
The whole thing?
Just from this.
Objection, Your Honor. He's asking the witness to read something that isn't his own writing. It's not in his affidavit. It's not his analysis. It's not his own professional work.
Good response.
Your Honor, I believe opposing counsel used this document for their own direct.
He brought it up on direct. I mean, he's just doing this cross-examination, so you can't let him, you can't use it on direct and then deny them the chance to use it on cross, so your objection is overruled.
Mr. Faith, can you read that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Faith, it doesn't say, what we know right now is that Millings Police has taken Walton away from the Civic Center, and all signs indicate that homicide charges are forthcoming. Is that what it says?
Yes, that's what it says.
Now, Mr. Faith, Reagan Thomas spoke with Captain Menudo that night.
Yes.
Captain Menudo never said that homicide charges were forthcoming, did he?
He didn't specifically say that, but
He never
No.
said that to Mr. Thomas?
no.
Now, he also spoke with Mickey McQuiggan, the head death investigator that night. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. McQuiggan never said that homicide charges were forthcoming, did he?
No.
You also believe that attribution is also an important component of journalistic ethics, correct?
That's correct.
You also believe there were conflicting eyewitnesses during that investigation.
It appeared that there were some conflicting eyewitnesses in the investigation.
And you reviewed this document before coming to trial today?
Absolutely, yes.
And in your review, does it at once specifically state the names of any of the sources, such as Jan Patel, Casey French?
Specifically, it doesn't state any of the names, but however, it does point out that Reagan Thomas has spoken to eyewitnesses and the police at the Civic Center. But specifically, it doesn't say who exactly is witnesses. It just says he's spoken with some witnesses.
And you also believe that fairness is an important attribute when you're reporting a story for standards of journalistic ethics, correct?
Yes.
And then isn't it true that in this report, that it uses the words such as gunned down, is that correct?
Again, as I stated before, this is inflammatory language that was used in the broadcast, but this is diminished by the fact that Reagan Thomas uses language that is such as it appears to be possible involvement in certain needs, so a few answers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, Reagan Thomas does use some inflammatory language, but it's diminished by
So,
the language.
Mr. Faith, the words such as gunned down, you believe is inflammatory, correct?
I do believe it's inflammatory, and it's quite common in journalism today.
You also use the terms such as Walton without a gun, correct? Which is also inflammatory language.
As I stated before,
You also observed that there was a conflict of interest in this specific investigation, correct?
conflict of interest on the part of.
Kick Berkshire and Drew Walton.
I did say that there was a conflict of interest, but not necessarily. It was unclear whether this conflict of interest was between Kit Berkshire and Drew Walton.
But you still admit that there was indeed a conflict.
There was some conflict of interest on the part of Berkshire and the Walton family, but again, this conflict of interest is diminished by the fact that Berkshire tells Reagan Thomas not to overstate the facts.
But to answer my question, yes or no, Mr. Faith, there was a conflict of interest between Kit Berkshire and
As I
Drew
said
Walton.
before, there was a conflict of interest between Berkshire and the Walton family.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect.
No redirect. We asked the witness to be excused.